Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I am Emily and welcome to a writing vlog about Project Grandfather, aka Thistle. Basically, when it's broken, it's time to fix the book. If you're new, a quick rundown of what happened here is I tried to write a new genre, which is lit RPG. I wrote an epic fantasy lit RPG about a grouchy old man and his two grandkids because it's a book by me. But I wrote a whole 130,000 word draft of this book back in June. And then promptly, it put me into burnout. I'm almost certain that's what did it. I don't like the book. I think it has lots of good sections. But in general, I don't like rereading it. I don't like thinking about it. There was something very wrong with it. But I didn't want to just drop it completely, not only because I put a lot of work into it, but also because the dynamics of old man and his grandkids, basically while he's going to rescue his son, that is an Emily McCosh book down to the core. That is exactly something I would like to write. Therefore, I knew I couldn't drop the thing. And I spent a lot of time agonizing over how I'm supposed to fix the damn thing. So I am going to jump back in time in this vlog a bit because I rambled on for about 30 minutes and now I'm going to have to edit that down. How I'm going to fix this book. So I'm gonna throw you guys back into that clip, you can watch that, and then I will be back to talk about where I've gotten since that clip. Okay? 3, 2, 1, back in time. You wanna hear a revelation I had about myself the other day? Of course you do. As you may have perhaps noticed, I've been having a problem with Thistle. Today's Friday, September 22nd, before I forget. I've been having a problem with Thistle, and I don't know what I'm doing with it, and I edited, you know, I did a lot of edits on it. Still wasn't working out. Something was wrong. And I've been resisting the idea of perhaps rewriting that book because when you didn't really enjoy the process to begin with, the idea of rewriting 130,000 words is not ideal. And I was just stuck on the fact that there was nothing really wrong with the book, so of course I could just edit it and something would click. And then it hit me the other day. I have rewritten every book I've ever published. We're not going to count All the Woods because those are short stories, but some of those did get rewritten. Oh my god, some of those did get rewritten. Under the Earth. If you've been on this channel, you know. That book got drafted, completely rewritten. There was a whole plot line in there that I didn't have. Lots of developmental edits. It was hell. But I love that book. In Dying Starlight, that was a whole thing because it started out as a short story. I wrote 50,000 words of a novel for it back in 2015, and then I let it go for a while and I wrote the first novella, and then I wrote it as a 5-novella series, and then I rewrote the entire thing as a 12-novella series. So that feels like it launches out of rewriting territory into just, I don't know, something a lot worse or better. I don't know. That's so much worse than a rewrite. And the sea at the end of everything. I wrote that a couple years ago, and I wanted to expand it a little, so last November, December, I rewrote it. Is rewriting things just part of my process? I don't want it to be. I will say that I think I think the fantasy romance is good. I'm about a third of the way into that. I finally wrote 1,000 words yesterday on that book. Fingers crossed, I really hope the burnout has burnt out. I don't think I'll need to rewrite that book, because the first third is very solid. There's some editing notes I need in there, but I don't really think I'm gonna need to rewrite it. I don't know. In the past couple days, have almost entirely resigned myself to the idea that I will probably rewrite Thistle. And let me tell you why. First of all, I did consider dropping this book, and that made me unhappy. And the idea of actually finishing the series made me relieved, I guess. We got a weird, complicated relationship going with this series, and I don't really know how to feel about it, because on the face value of it, this is the exact type of story that I should like to write. You know, evidently, the parent-child trope is a permanent part of my existence and shall insert itself into literally everything I write. Almost everything. The sea doesn't really have it. But the concept of adventure story, cranky old grandpa as a main character with his two grandkids, one of whom really likes him, one of whom doesn't, basically going to rescue his son. That's me, you know? That is me in a story concept. And yeah, I struggle so much with this book, with the whole series. I don't like thinking about it, which is weird. This is a bizarre interaction I have with this series, but I don't want to drop it. I don't want to. And so I was looking at all the individual elements of the book to try to figure out which part I didn't like. you know, the relationships I do like. I think they could be written better, but the relationship between Eli and his granddaughter, it's adorable, it's cute. The relationship between Eli and Thistle is hilarious. The grandson is hilarious. It's kind of stressful to write, but there's lots of stressful things to write. That's not really a bad thing. The flashbacks between Eli and his son, one of the best parts of the book. Love those. I like the monsters, and the world building is kind of cool. The adventure plot itself, there's nothing wrong with it. I still think the pacing is off even after edits, but there's nothing wrong with it. I like it. It is sad. I'm gonna get to that. It's kind of sad. We're gonna get to that. I thought, okay, maybe lit RPG really isn't for me. Like, maybe the fact that I have to stick to a sort of hard magic system and doing the system notes and everything, maybe that's what gets me. But the actual system notes themselves, I think they're kind of fun. They're kind of cool. They're interesting. And the skills that go along with the system are basically just like spells. And I like spells in Magic. I have probably created the softest lit RPG system that has ever systemed. Even my readers on Royal Road were like, is there a point where this system is ever going to make sense? And initially I thought, yeah, and the more I go along, I was kind of like, no, I'm probably gonna just stick to this weird crap. I don't really think that's what I need to change. I might need to change some of it. I might make it a softer system, which brings me to the thing that finally made me go, yeah, I gotta rewrite it. This is gonna be a long-winded clip. I don't care. There's a piece of writing advice out there, you may have heard of it, you may have not, and that is if a scene feels stale, try changing the weather. You know, if you think the character interactions are good or the plot is going where it should be but something feels wrong, try changing the weather / the setting and see if that fixes it. And that is a shockingly, stunningly useful piece of writing advice that has helped me on many an occasion. Perhaps it will help you. I went, well, okay, since I like the character relationships and I like the plot, it's a little sad, but I like it. I could sort of fix the sadness a little bit. And I don't mind the system, I might tweak it, but I don't mind the lit RPG system part of it. What is really left? The writing itself and the tone / the atmosphere. And so one of the things I have gotten comments on Royal Road, and there's general advice, don't listen to comments of people who are reading. If they're criticizing you, don't necessarily listen. But I did get a few comments along these lines, and I agree with them, and that is that it is kind of a difficult book to read at some points because it is very dreary and depressing, and the world is essentially a dystopian fantasy, and the character is an old man who has regrets and has failed in his has failed in his younger years and is trying to redeem himself and doesn't know if he can and is in over his head. It gets a bit dreary, and part of that is necessary. One of the most popular chapters, one of my favorite chapters, is a very, very dark implications chapter, and it was actually written very well. Good job, Emily. And I got the most comments and like the most 5-star ratings on that chapter. So the problem is not necessarily that it is a darkly undertoned story, or just right on the face of it kind of dark sometimes. That is not the problem. And lots of my books have dark implications. I've been having a lot of thoughts about this over the past week, if you can't tell, and you're gonna get them all right now. This is gonna be a long clip. I'm gonna hate to edit it. I'm so sorry, Emily. So sorry, future Emily. Number one, I think if you've read my books, maybe this will be obvious, and it didn't really occur to me until the other day, because like I know this subconsciously, but actually putting it into words and figuring out the way to plot this is different, and that is, a lot of my books have dark implications, but I like the characters to have moments of contentment, I guess, is a way to put it. Under the Earth is it's a pretty light story. It has some heavy stuff in it that makes people cry, but in general, it's a very comforting book to read. In Dying Starlight, it has a lot of similarities to Thistle, and that is the main character is almost constantly beat up, constantly on the run, constantly in some sort of situation where he is unhappy, and yet that story feels very light, and it is easy to read, and it is easy to write, and it feels like a joy when I edit. When I edit in Dying Starlight, it makes me happy. Like, in general, I don't like editing, and I still don't really enjoy the editing, but just reading it is fun. And that partially has to do with the main character has a sense of humor that is like a coping mechanism. And Eli from Thistle is not such a sarcastic, over-the-top, weird sense of humor oddball like Aaron is in Undying Starlight. So they're different characters, which is fine, but there is overall a tone of enjoyable to Undying Starlight, despite the fact that there is extremely dark implications with how cyborgs work and that the main character is almost constantly bleeding. But there's like 2 whole novellas that are just cozy in that series. It feels good to read, and Thistle does not feel good to read, it does not feel good to write, and some of that is necessary. Like, there are people that have turned into monsters. You know, I sort of jokingly told my friend one time, this bears a lot of resemblance to The Last of Us, and I had been beginning the drafts and outlines of this book right about when that show came out, and I watched that show and I went, huh. But like, even that show, I gotta tell you, I didn't watch it. I watched a lot of reactions to it. Even that show feels enjoyable to watch. I'm not watching the 2nd season because I've heard about what happens in the games, and nah. Point is, dystopias can feel like enjoyable reads. I am not aiming for like the YA dystopias that scarred me for life. I'm looking at you, Divergent. I'm not aiming for depressing. The ending of the whole series, I'm aiming for bittersweet, but not terribly tragic. Not tragic. Well, it's a little tragic. The world is dying. You get what I'm trying to say, I think. Gosh, I hope so. And that last third of the book is the closest to the tone I was going for, but it still wasn't written very well. I don't really know what happened with this book, because did I write it quickly? Yeah, but I also wrote the first third of the fantasy romance book in like 2 weeks, or a week. I wrote a lot of the fantasy romance book in a very, very condensed amount of time, and the tone and the atmosphere on that is, not to pat myself on the back, but impeccable. It is good. So it wasn't the fact that I was fast drafting it. It wasn't the fact that it was a new book, because the fantasy romance was a new book too. I don't know where I went wrong with Thistle, but I took a turn somewhere and just kept on barreling downhill, not realizing it, until I had written 130,000 words of it, and I went, oh crap. The original idea for this whole series was dystopian world, fantasy dystopia, not modern. Fantasy dystopia where Eli has adventures with his grandkids on the way back to rescue his son, essentially. And there was gonna be some, it's dystopia, there's some dark undertones and stuff like that, but it was kind of gonna be in a lighthearted sense. Like, I have notes written down for this story, like where they take a hot air balloon ride. I don't know, yeah, I know it's fantasy, but like magic hot air balloon, I don't know where I was going with this. And at some point, out of necessity and like where the plot took me, it got a lot darker. It's not very light and fluffy, and that's necessary. Words are hard. And that's necessary, especially in an adult book. This is an adult series. This is not like middle grade or something. It would be way too dark for middle grade. I feel like I have a point, and I hope you guys get what the point is, but I am rambling. So there is a necessary darkness, and there is a necessary depressing tone to some of it, but I think the book as a whole, separate of the plot, feels dull. Freaking terrible. And I've never really had this happen. Like, I've written bad stuff before, but most of it was when I was younger. Like, that's the one thing that from out the gate on the rough draft I get correct, is the atmosphere. The character relationships, sometimes they need work, and sometimes the plot is incoherent, and sometimes the magic system is so soft that it practically makes no sense. But the one thing I always do really well is the atmosphere, and I think this book does have atmosphere, but it's the wrong atmosphere. I think there's a few things I'm gonna do as far as Thistle goes. First of all, probably the funniest and, I don't want to say least important, but one of the least important things is I'm going to get an entirely new playlist set up for this book because the vibes are not vibing. Second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at a few of the notes that I originally had in that flower notebook that's sitting somewhere over there and I'm too lazy to go get it. I'm gonna look at those notes, remember some of the plot points that I had that were a little bit lighter, and without rereading the book or looking at my current outline, I'm going to re-outline the whole series, at least the first book, and like lightly books 2 and 3. See if I can get to an outline that I like. So, those are my incredibly rambly thoughts about how I may possibly fix Thistle. I hope so. I don't want to drop it, because I can't like press delete in my brain and never think about it again. And I may let it sit for a while. You know, I might write the fantasy romance and I might start writing something else and keep chipping away at Thistle and come back to it in 6 months to a year, or I may hit on the exact right thing I need to do in a month from now. I have no idea. So yeah, whole point is that whole piece of writing advice where you change the weather and help the tone of the scene. I might have to, I don't necessarily think I'm gonna change the weather, although I might, but change the setting, the tone, and the atmosphere of the whole book. Okay, so now you have context. I genuinely can't remember what I told you guys in that last clip other than that I'm rewriting the book, but basically it was somewhere along the lines of, you know, if a scene feels funky, change the weather. Well, the whole book feels funky, change the setting and the atmosphere. Okay, I changed the genre. We are changing the genre, so let me tell you something. Back when I was brainstorming this book early this year, today is Sunday, October 1st, by the way. Back when I was brainstorming this book earlier this year, one of the ideas I had about it was maybe it should be a kind of sci-fi adjacent type book. Not space opera like in Dying Starlight was, but kind of, it's a post-apocalyptic fantasy setting right now. But what if I did sort of post-apocalyptic sci-fi-y, not dystopia, not like gritty dystopia, not that type of thing, but keep the way that the plants are overgrowing the magic system, but do it in a sci-fi type world. So like they don't have space travel, but they have, you know, they have ships that can go across the land, or they have buildings that used to move, and they had certain sort of mechanical elements, but all of them were powered by magic. I had that idea. I didn't have the powered by magic part. I just had the idea months back that maybe it could be a sci-fi, and then I just sort of put that aside because I was like, well, this is a lit RPG, so it should probably be epic fantasy. And then I promptly forgot about that idea. I should listen to myself more often and just ignore, oh, it should be this because of the genre. Because I revisited that idea the other day, that what if I made this kind of a sci-fi-y thing? You know, kind of Star Wars vibes without the space travel. And I revisited that the other day because I was looking at some art on Pinterest that was kind of like, you know, someone parked a spaceship on a mountain and there's planets in the background. And I'm going, oh, it reminds me of In Dying Starlight. And I'm like, well, I wanted to write another science fiction anyway, didn't I? And I had a little light bulb moment that maybe I should have listened to myself 8 to 10 months ago, or whenever I thought of this, and maybe I should do the little quiet post-apocalyptic type sci-fi fantasy world, where it's kind of a weird mashup between, it really is fantasy still because the magic powers everything, but there is like old technology left over. And I sat down and I wrote an entire list of all the cool things I could put in this book, and all the cool setting stuff I could do, and all the interesting atmosphere things I could do, and the things where I could put the characters, and I immediately want to start rewriting it now. Listen to your instincts. I'm a little mad at myself that I was like, well, I should fall in line with what other lit RPG books are like. And so I did. And then I hated it. The basis of the plot line is still the same. The character dynamics and relationships are still the same. I need to write them better, but they're still the same. Even like what the characters do, they leave a certain point, they're trying to get to another point, and the vague way that they get there is still the same. We're just making it not dull. I'm gonna reappear with this book in like a year on Royal Road, and my old readers are gonna be like, well, what the hell just happened? But it'll be better. I do feel much better now, though, because at least I have figured out a way to fix it, and I'm legitimately kind of excited to write it now. I don't know entirely how I'm going to do so, but I shall do so. We're gonna hush up, and I actually need to go back to editing the fantasy romance. Okay. Alright, we're gonna talk about Thistle some more. It's Friday, October 27th. I know I haven't updated this vlog, so I don't remember what I told you. I just know that I told you that I am rewriting this series from scratch, tossing that 130K. The main thing I'm doing is, okay, I have so many things I want to say in this clip. Okay, we're gonna talk about what the main world building thing is I need to fix, and then we're gonna talk about Eli, the main character, because I have a unique issue with him, which I have never had before. So first of all, the main thing I need to figure out about the magic system is what exactly, I don't want to give spoilers, what exactly the society did in order to screw it up. You know, there's this like scientific aspect to the magic, but also I don't like hard magic systems. I adore soft magic systems, and lit RPG is simply not a soft magic system genre. So I'm trying to like mash up the two in the best way possible. What exactly they did to break the system, and therefore what exactly will fix the system, as long as I have the solution to the magic system part at the end, I can do what I always do with books and discovery write it as I go with the words are difficult. I can't think of the word I'm trying to think of. They can go towards the end of the plot, and I can know what I need to sprinkle in as far as the hard magic system goes. Yeah? I hope that made sense. If it doesn't, I'm sorry. So that's the main thing. Right now, it's kind of like I have a soft magic explanation and a hard magic system. And right now, I need like a mixture of the two. Okay, so that is the main thing I need to do before I ever start rewriting this. Second of all, let's talk about Eli. Eli is the main character. He is the grouchy old grandpa. I'm having a problem connecting with Eli as the main character, I think. Which is weird because I wrote him for 130,000 words and I liked his character, but it was just, I don't like the brain space he's in. And I don't connect with him as much. I was thinking about like my old characters, or the characters I have written, or the characters that I haven't written yet, but I know in my head. Like I have a lot of my characters who are traumatized when they come into the story, and you know, they get traumatized more as they go through the story, but also kind of emotionally healed as they go through the story. And that's a very, stop shaking the camera, Emily. You know, if you've read In Dying Starlight, Aaron, his coping mechanism is kind of like aggressive sarcasm and humor, but in general, he does enjoy his life. He has Bat, and he has a spaceship, and he likes bounty hunting. He doesn't like the interacting with people part, but he likes the basically being the badass part. He has a lot of past trauma, but he copes with it in like a fun way to write, if that makes sense. IMR from Under the Earth also has past trauma, but he copes through just enjoying his life, if that makes sense. Like he's so just like, oh, look at the flowers, look at the trees in bloom. My trees are in bloom, and my people are happy, and I can just, you know, wander around in the gardens. And he takes so much happiness in like just the little things that he has. I mean, he's king. He's like, it's his whole kingdom. But he's very like, oh, look at the birds. I'm going to feed the birds, and look at the flowers. He's literally stop and smell the roses. So he was very fun to write. He was also a non-human character, so trying to write him mentally was a fun challenge. Marin from The Sea at the End of Everything. I don't know her as well because it was a novella, but I don't think I had to connect with her as much either, in a weird sort of way, just because it was a novella. But her like coping mechanism of it, she's taking care of the guy in the story, and she's kind of like constantly harassing her sister. Niamh, the main character in the fantasy romance I'm working on, she is genuinely one of like the happiest main characters I've ever written. Like she has some past stuff, but 90% of the time, she's very happy with her life. Like she's got some friends she really likes. She has a nice relationship with her parents, and she's a little bit like IMR too. Let's go smell the roses and look at the pretty trees. She's very not sulky. She's like the least sulky protagonist I've ever had, which is hilarious because I wrote like 400,000 words of Aaron. The only one other character I will talk about is a character named Ian. He is in a series you guys don't know about. He's like the first original series I ever tried to write when I was 16. I put it aside because it was hot garbage, but I will eventually write it in the future, and I think about that story a lot. I know I've never really talked about it because I'm not going to write it anytime soon, so it's just kind of useless to talk about. It's just kind of like that story I have in the back of my head. He is similar to Eli in that he had a certain type of childhood and he's had a certain type of adulthood, but he's just kind of unendingly positive. That part is different from Eli. He's just unendingly positive. He kind of takes comfort in being the protector of his family and the people around him. And so Ian's anger and his love for his family and everything else is kind of balanced out really well, but I have been thinking about this character for like 10, 15 years, so I can't really replicate him very well. I wouldn't want to replicate him, but the type of balance that comes with that type of complex character, I cannot replicate very well. And then we got Eli, who, again, like he's like this weird combination of he is a kind person and he doesn't connect well with other people at all. And he's not overly angry like Aaron is, to the point where it's like fun and easy to write in his headspace, but he's also not happy and enjoying anything in his life like Aymar is or Niev is, because like everything went to crap. He has nothing at the beginning of the story, basically. He doesn't really have any reason to live. He is just kind of surviving. Like, he loves his family very much, and he just doesn't really express it very well. And that, I don't want to change his character. I like that kind of interesting dynamic about he is one of the most badass warriors who has ever existed, at least when he was a younger man. He was one of the most badass warriors that have ever existed, but he kind of grew up in a situation, like he grew up in a school for all boys and then a fighting school for all boys. So he doesn't do court politics, even though he's in the court because he's the highest ranked warrior there is. He doesn't do court politics very well. Like, he's awkward and uncomfortable around other people, and like he doesn't really know how to talk to women. He has a wife in like the flashbacks part of the story, but even then he's just kind of like socially awkward forever, and it's very cute, and I like that dynamic of he is the highest ranked warrior in the magic system, but he just kind of chills and keeps to himself and is happy with a simplistic life. And that part is actually easier to write than when he has lost all of that, and he's also lost his magic system, which is a part of how high ranked of a warrior he was. So he's got nothing. And like that is the point, because his grandkids pop back into life and he's like, well, time to put myself back together and figure out if I can get my magic back and protect these two kids while I'm going to rescue my son, who his relationship with has deteriorated. It's good stuff and I like it, but I don't connect with him very well, and it's kind of weird. He's not Aaron enough that it's like fun and fuzzy to write in his headspace, and he's not Aymar enough that he's like traumatized but enjoying his life and happy and expresses himself well enough. So I'm like in this weird middle zone of he is, I guess, like a personality type that I don't connect with at all. But I like him the way he is, and I don't want to change him. I do want to like tweak stuff about him enough that I can connect with him more. Like, I need to give him something that gives him enjoyment just in his general life. But it's just this weird, I've never really had this with a character before. I know what his motivations are. His motivations are very strong. I know what his like wants and desires are. They're very strong. I know how he would react to each situation. Like there's a good test of whether or not you know your characters, and like throw them into this random situation and see how they would react in different unique circumstances. And if there is, like, if you have written the character well, is like a real person, they will react a certain way based on who they are. And I think I have that with him too. But like I'm just like, how do I write him? I don't know. This is a weird thing for me. This whole series started out in such a backwards fashion from how I originally write books. I even remember thinking about this story when I first thought it up and going, this is an interesting way for me to write a book, because I came up with the world and the system before I came up with the characters. That is not what I do. I am like a 99% character driven writer. The world building is just like something that is there because I have to make it there. And this, I sort of did the exact opposite thing, and now I'm going, well, I don't really know what I'm supposed to do with this character, even though I wrote 130,000 words of him and he is like fully fleshed out as a person. Not fully fleshed out, but very fleshed out as a person. Those are the two struggles, just those little minor two things, no big deal, you know. Actually, I'm going to wrap up this vlog for Thistle right here. It's Monday, November 20th right now. I'm right in the middle of NaNoWriMo and thus in the middle of the fantasy romance book. And I'm just kind of letting Thistle sit in my head. Some books are right immediately and they're good books, like the fantasy romance. Some are, I really shouldn't have written it this quickly, and it's gonna have to sit for a while before I write it. And I think Thistle is definitely that book. So basically, I don't actually know when I'm going to get started on doing anything tangible with it, like re-outlining it or redrafting it. So I just like to wrap this vlog up so I can actually post it and you guys can see where I've been heading with this story. So thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, giving it a thumbs up and a subscribe really helps out my channel. You can, of course, grab these and all my other books. Links are in the description. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!